Hello, class. My name is Saria, and Marlon covered the first half of this week's reading lesson, and I will now be covering the second half, which is based on the article Integrating Pronunciation into ESL EFL Classrooms by Levies and Grant. Pronunciation is important because when one is speaking, we want to be able to understand what is being said. And successful communication requires intelligible pronunciation because unintelligible speech is not understandable and one is unable to keep up or follow what is being said or communicated. Therefore, because pronunciation is so important, many times we as educators are not sure how to go about implementing and teaching this effectively. Many times we want to teach pronunciation, yet we're not quite sure how to integrate this without making this the primary focus of the class. Levy stated, approaches favoring the integration of pronunciation into oral communication have been espoused for more than 10 years, but teachers have received little clear direction about how to accomplish this integration. So I'm going to break this article down into three parts. In the first part, I will talk about the challenges that are associated with teaching pronunciation and oral communication. Next, I will cover three guiding principles that will help us with incorporating pronunciation into oral communication courses. And finally, the fun part, where we will cover briefly four activities that are available for us to implement into our classroom instruction. The article talked about this five-stage model for teaching pronunciation communicatively. And I guess in an ideal situation or an ideal world, one would go through these five stages and everything would work perfectly. But that is not the way it happens. When teaching, too much time tends to be end up spent on controlled or guided practice, which results in the more communicative end of the pronunciation spectrum being shortchanged or short shifted and not given much time. And then also, actual speaking practice is usually unrelated to pronunciation or ignored altogether as less structure speaking practice. And this would lead to pronunciation being addressed unsystematically, as the article talked about. When teaching pronunciation and communication unsystematically, it would be when we would tend to fall into a pattern in which we focus on pronunciation as a corrective measure when errors are too prominent to be ignored. Another challenge would be that the students do not get provided with the full range of practice activities they need for improving speaking and pronunciation. And I think one of the biggest challenges comes into play where, although we'd like to teach pronunciation for communication, we have a little bit of trouble with having enough activities for our students to be able to improve their speaking pronunciation. And a lot of times it's focused on listening comprehension or reading orally, and the students don't get enough practice in actually speaking and working on their pronunciation. So, with the challenges that are associated in teaching pronunciation and oral communication, what can we do when we're trying to incorporate pronunciation in our ESL classrooms? Well, in this article, Levies and Grant outlined three guiding principles. As they mentioned, these principles promote the integration of pronunciation in ways that link features of speech with their communicative functions rather than ways that promote non-contextualized or irrelevant work on the sound system. So, Principle 1 talks about aiming for a primary, though not exclusive, focus on suprasegmentals. And this would mean that we would want to be cognizant of the stress, the rhythm, and the intonation in speaking. These features contribute to the skill when we're speaking and not just focusing on individual words, but everything together as a whole. Now, Principle 2 talks about maintaining a central focus on speaking in the class. In maintaining a central focus on speaking in the class, we want to be sure that we are teaching pronunciation naturally. We do this by targeting features that come up naturally from the speaking activity and contribute to the success of the interaction. Finally, Principle 3 talks about pronunciation instruction needing to fit the constraints of the speaking task. When we're teaching, we can have the class present prepared oral presentations. This will be something that they have taken time to carefully prepare and plan, and other times we can have them present their speech spontaneously, and this would be where they're extemporaneously construe what they're going to say or actually speaking. As the article brought out, we need to integrate pronunciation into the speaking classroom by means of planned as well as unplanned speaking. I really like how the article provided solutions by the way of the 4 activities that we can use in our classrooms to help our students develop and improve on their oral communication skills. These activities are as listed: word clarity in public speaking, thought groups and storytelling, intonation and conversation, and focus and comparisons. Let's take the first activity. Oral presentations are really good because they give students an opportunity to work on specific pronunciation skills without actual classroom instruction. In this way, the students can work on specific areas such as phrasing or rhythm or sentence focus. And this ties in with word clarity, in which the students are able to work on whichever challenges they are having speaking words to be understood. The article has an outline instructional sequence that we can use as a guide in our classrooms to help the students work on their clarity in oral presentations. Now, for phrasing and storytelling, I like the activity. This is really good because it enables students to relate to a personal narrative of their own. I found that these types of stories really enhance language skills because everyone tends to be more comfortable talking about themselves on topics related to themselves or something that they're interested in. And again, the chapter provides an example of a hypothetical narrative that illustrates how a text can be divided into chunks or thoughts groups in helping the student. Activity 3, annotation and conversation, are something else that we can use in our classrooms. This is really good because we want our students to develop everyday dialogue conversation. And we are able to have control practice with the conversational discourse, working with speech, rhythm focus, and intonation, along with body language. Now, this activity will help them to be more natural in the area of discourse markers, and it's really important because they don't really show up in written speech. And for the most part, they're not explicitly taught, and this would go hand in hand with idioms and different cues that show one is listening. The article again brings out that teaching discourse markers may require the teacher to adapt textbook dialogues because textbook dialogues frequently do not include these markers of coherence. Activity 4, focus on comparison and contrast writing. Well, when dealing with academic English, one shows how they're competent in a subject by means of their writing. So having students focus on comparing, and also because writing is an excellent way to have the student explore relationships between ideas, when our students are reading, we can work on and create compare and contrast charts. Well, that concludes our presentation for this week. I hope you were able to glean some helpful points from it, and I look forward to your discussions.